Good evening, welcome. We'll wait 1 minute and let everyone join the webinar. Good evening. I'm Brother Isaac. Welcome to this panel discussion with Benedictines as part of the Humanities program Conversatio. And will be 4 panelists this evening, including myself. And I will ask each of the panelists to introduce himself, and then we'll have a Q&A with those of you participating in the webinar. So the first person I'd like to introduce himself is Abbot Mark.
Good evening. I am Abbot Mark, the abbot of the St. Anselm Abbey community. I was elected in 2012, and before that I worked in the college for 3 decades. I was a graduate of the college in 1971 as a politics major, and then I went on to graduate school. So.
Thank you, Abbot Mark. Father Mathias, would you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, Father Mathias. You saw me in the video. Hopefully you watched it. So we have some good discussions going tonight. I've been here 32 years. Been a monk since, been a priest since 1993. And I don't want to talk more about me. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Right now I see 300, I'll round up, 350 of you are showing up. That's wonderful. I hope this is informative. And now I'm going to introduce to you Father Francis. I'm not used to that yet.
Hello, everybody. I'm Father Francis McCarty. I'm one of the newer members of St. Anselm Abbey. I've been a monk here since 2015. I graduated from St. Anselm College in 2010. I was just ordained a deacon last month, almost exactly a month ago. And I'm currently in seminary studies, studying to be a priest. So we'll send it back over to Brother Isaac.
Thank you, Father Francis. I'm Brother Isaac Murphy. I am the Vice President for Academic Affairs. I also teach in the Department of Politics. I came to join St. Anselm Abbey in 1991, and I've been working in the college since 2001. So, and I'm originally from Montreal, so I don't know if you can pick up a little bit of a Canadian accent there, but I've been here in the US and an American citizen since 2003. So happy to be that, especially politics, particularly interesting today. So today this evening, we're going to do some questions and answers. So you see as we're all very familiar with Zoom technology, so the Q&A button is on the bottom. So please put your questions in there and we will do our best to answer them. And I would like to start off with a question for each of the panelists. When did you know you wanted to become a monk? And this is kind of the interesting take on that question. Was there a specific moment or was it a more gradual decision? So who would like to go first on that one?
I can go. Again, Abbot Mark. There was no specific moment for me. I came to St. Anselm as a freshman with no intention of priesthood or religious life. It was in getting to know some of the monks and to see what they did. And I spent a weekend in the monastery my freshman year. And I got to know some of the monks better. I continued on in the school. I graduated, as I mentioned, in 1971. And I think it was maybe the latter part of my senior year that I said, I think I'd like to try this. I had applied to some grad schools, but I said, I think if I leave and go off to grad school, I won't try this. I won't come back. So I entered in the summer of 1971, and next summer it'll be 50 years since I since I came here.
I guess I'll go next. The first time I realized that I had to be here, I was only 15 years old. And it was my very first time coming to Mass in the Abbey. And when I saw the monks there, it's a moment in my timeline that I will never, ever forget. And nor will my family. All six of us were here, my siblings and my parents. And it's something that haunted me for the rest of my life. It appealed to me, but it terrified me at the same time. But that is definitely the moment when I first fell in love with this place. And oddly enough, what led us here is the fact that my whole family had pretty much stopped going to church. And it was the former vice president of St. Anselm College, who was good friends with my father, told him, "Lou, your kids have to go to church, take them to the Abbey." So we came rather reluctantly, and it changed my life at 15. But I didn't enter for good until I was 30. So it was a long, crooked path, but it's one that I'm very grateful for.
I was exposed to a number of opportunities when I was a student at the college, working with monks on different projects, having them as professors, coming to visit the monastery and seeing what the life was all about. But I really had no intention of joining the monastery or becoming a monk. I graduated from the college. I taught in a Catholic school for 5 years. I went through some periods of soul searching, and I decided to make a retreat here in the summer of 2014, and had been a practice of mine for a while. Again, not really thinking that this would be a possibility for me, or even a realistic thing for me. But the week that I ended up being here in 2014 was the week of July the 11th, 2014, which is the feast of Saint Benedict. And I was here on that day, and I watched Brother Ignatius take vows that day. And when I watched him take vows that day, something clicked for me. It sort of was a moment where I said to myself, everything you've been looking for has been here all along. And that's when I started the process of applying and joining the monastery.
Thank you, Father Francis. I was attracted to monastic life, and so in that sense, it was gradual. And I knew a couple of other monastic communities in Canada, both relatively close to where I grew up. But one of my friends dated a woman who was here as a student in the 1980s and told me that I should come check out St. Anselm's, about 200 miles from south of where I grew up. And I knew the first day that I walked onto campus and I walked around the quad, I knew that this is where I wanted to be. So in that sense, that it was sudden in that sense that I wanted to be a monk, which was gradual, but that I wanted to be a monk at St. Anselm Abbey. I pretty much figured out my very first time on campus in 1990. So here's another question, and we don't all have to answer this one, but I think this is a good one. It's a good follow-up to the one I just asked. How is joining the monastery different from joining a cult? So who wants to go for that one? Who's brave?
Francis, you like that question? Go
I
ahead.
love this question. I get this question all the time, including from members of my own family. The fundamental difference between us and a cult is freedom. All the monks that you will meet have decided to join this life freely, and they've made that decision after painstaking and arduous work, meaning they've prayed about it, they've talked with people about it, they've spent time here, and it's not a decision taken lightly. It's also not, we're not in a personality cult. I think Abbot Mark would be the first person to say that. We're not focused on service to we are in a way focused on service to a person, but that person is Jesus Christ. He's God. So it's different. But I think the fundamental important aspect here is that this is a free choice for us, and it's not taken lightly.
I would add to that there's also part of the process is to do a psychological evaluation. And I don't think cults do that because if they did, there wouldn't be any. So we're here of sound mind and faithful hearts, as Father Francis said, trying to find God. So, I guess the street version of a cult, yeah, we satisfy that. But the real altruistic meaning of a cult, we far surpass that. It's a group of men trying to find God together, and it's bizarre and beautiful at the same time.
I would say too that the thrust when you first enter the monastery is to see if you can really engage in this life and be happy. And you're given a lot of time. We have a year of novitiate. We have 3 years of being a junior. You may have some length of postulancy even before you begin novitiate. So there may be 4.5 years before you would have to make up your mind finally. And I think the work of the people who guide you, your novice master, your junior master, is to keep asking the question, does this person fit in? And does he want to be here? And is he going to be happy here? That is a huge question, because I think I try to say as abbot over and over again in my conferences that if you could come to the monastery for a short while and be very happy and just enjoy the fraternity and the prayer life, but if you're not paying attention to the elements of the life that bring you closer to Christ, so that you really fall in love with Christ, because that's your vocation. And if you don't do that, you're not going to be happy. You might even stick it out for your whole lifetime, but you're not going to be happy. You're going to be, and you're probably not going to make others happy as well. So it's a strong process. It's a rigorous process that we go through when we come here. But that's what it's all about. Do you seek Christ, and do you do it in a way with your brothers that's going to make you happy and make you a positive aspect in the life of others?
Speaking of joining the Abbey, this one is specifically mentions Abbot Mark in it, but I'll let anyone answer it. Does Abbot Mark have a tally board of students he thinks will enter the monastery? And if so, how high would so-and-so, I'm going to leave the name out, be on the list?
I gotta know the so-and-so. Let me get my list out. It's in the bottom drawer.
So is that a yes or a no, Father Abbot?
Yeah, my answer would be no. I think people find us rather than, I think we do a certain amount of outreach. We want vocations. We want good young men to enter our community. But it kind of happens fairly naturally. We see that someone's interested. We see that somebody's maybe coming around to Mass or to our divine office, Vespers, morning prayer. Not too much morning prayer because it's early, but noon prayer or Vespers. And then you get to know them and strike up a conversation. And if they're interested, it will surface. And then you, again, you don't want to encourage people that are not going to be a good fit. So you kind of take it from there. And some people maybe that are very, very eager, you may kind of dampen their enthusiasm a little bit just to see if they might mature a little bit more or become a better fit over time.
I was thinking for the next question to go in reverse seniority order. So Father Francis, this will come first to you. But what kind of changes have you seen at the Abbey over your tenure?
So I've only been here 5 years, so this is going to be a short answer. I would say the big change for me has come in the last 7 or 8 months, in that we have a lot of monks who, in order to do what we do in the college, to do what we do for our ministry, have really found ways of finding ways to adapt themselves to technology. Um, we have a lot of Luddites in the house who are not so great, and many of them have risen to the occasion in the last few months in order to make this work. The mere fact that we're doing this panel right now over Zoom, I'd say, is a big change in the last 7 or 8 months.
That is a big change. My own, since I'm next in seniority, reverse seniority order, the big change that I've noticed, well, two big changes. One is the number of monks in the house. So there's an official list that's published every year of all the monks who are in vows in the house. It's called the Ordo. It also has the liturgical calendar in it. And the first time I appeared in it by name was in 1994. And I was number 50. I was the 50th monk in the house. And now I'm somewhere in the middle, but we're about 30 monks, 31 or so in the order. So that certainly is a big change. Right now we have 8 monks working full time in the college. And I think, I don't know the number back 30 years ago, but I'm sure it was more. And especially in teaching full time and then in the administration, I would say senior levels of the administration. Father Mathias, how about you?
Yeah, that's the only change that comes to mind readily. You know, little things maybe, like we used to have the Sisters of St. Joan of Arc here, which was huge when they left. But I'm in my 60s now, so I'm getting to be one of the older fathers, which blows my mind, because when I entered over 30 years ago, I was considered a delayed vocation because I was 30 years old. And already 30 years later, I'm almost one of the old guys. I get, the saying, when life flies when you're having fun. So I must be having a blast here because it has flown by. It's different, but it's not. Stability and, the vows are the same. We have a different abbot than we had when I first entered. So, the faces are different, but the house is the same. And that's I find a huge consolation for somebody like me. Having a vow of stability where I'm here all my life, this is really, really home. I guess the other thing that is a little shocking to me is we now have students whose parents, I remember when they were students, and I knew the parents separately before the parents even met. So, I've seen a lot of families get started here on campus, and I didn't expect that as a monk at all, but it's pretty cool.
I've been coming here all my life. I had 2 uncles who were Benedictines here, and that's really the only reason I came to college here. But I would guess, so I entered after I graduated in 71. I would guess that the last almost 50 years have seen less change than probably maybe even the 15 years prior to when I arrived. You hear the stories, you hear, some of the monks when you enter have been here a long time. So you hear the stories from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And just judging by my earlier visits with my uncles and some of the stories that I've heard over the years about the early days, it's pretty, in my mind, pretty much the same today as it was back in 71. There was this, in terms of freedom to do things as a monk that are in harmony with your vocation, but I think things were much stricter. Not too many years before I came, I remember hearing stories about the entire monastery when they were maybe 50 or 60 men here. They had 2 cars. It's like, I don't know where we'd be if we had 2 cars today. I'd be hung out in the front yard. But so it's been very stable for me. With the beautiful Abbey Church was a year old when I arrived as a freshman, and I've used that every day that I've been here since I entered. So our monastery is the same building. Our customs kind of carry us forward in a way that you don't have a lot of change. So I'd say I don't know, maybe the biggest change is technology. Certainly in the work field. I remember when I started in the business office in 1976, we had an IBM mainframe with 3. I don't even know if you know this term anymore, but they used to call them dumb tubes, which didn't go back and forth with one another at all, but they were all connected, hardwired to the mainframe.
Since you mentioned having 2 cars, and now obviously we have a fleet of cars. I mean, for anyone who's driven around campus and seen the monastery lot, but someone did write in a question that says, well, where are the monks going to when they're in their cars driving off campus? Where is it that they're going?
I'm not going to say. No. We all are asked to assist at times with masses. We, run errands. Father Patrick's always taking the elderly to different appointments. He's our infirmarian. So there's any number of reasons to be taking a car and leaving campus. Everybody has off-campus meetings. So I don't know, others can add to that, but
I mean, much less so in the last 7 months, obviously. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the last time I went off campus. But before pandemic, Abbot Mark, you're absolutely right. Grocery store, the pharmacy, assisting with masses, off-campus meetings, any number of things that that you would normally think of in someone's life, we have to do, and so that's where we're going. And please wave. I love waving at people, so please wave.
I will say this, that because of the pandemic, but I remember taking a car. I had to go to Boston for something, and I actually I calculated. I said, my gosh, I said, this is the first time in about 100 days that I've been behind the wheel of a car going someplace that's more than just within a couple miles of the campus. And it was a strange feeling, and what brought it to my mind. Yeah, so in ordinary times, we probably do a lot more traveling, but the COVID has put a damper on all of us.
One student wants to know, Abbot Mark, does the abbot get a better living space and bedroom?
Actually, he does. I was in several different rooms prior to being elected abbot, and when you're elected abbot, there's an abbot's suite. So I am in an outer office of that suite, and then there's another section with bathroom, closets, and then a third room with a very spacious bedroom. What I was in before for 30 years was a room that was probably about 14 by 14, a sink in there, bed, desk, cabinets, closet, but then there was a bathroom down the hall that was a shared bathroom. So yeah, this is this is much nicer. I don't know what I'll do when they kick me out.
Brother Isaac, I was going to say I'm in one of those rooms right now. If it's worth it. This is a monastic room that has been converted into an office for our use, but what you see behind me is about the size anyway of a typical monk's room, and so.
But it's not a former abbot's room.
It is not. It's a plain old monk's room.
It's a cell.
Yeah.
CELO. There's a question here. How is the abbot chosen? I thought it's an interesting question. I thought I'd lead off. Since I'm moderating, I get to assign myself a question. But periodically we have elections for an abbot, and an abbot retires right now. So the rules that we follow currently for the congregation that we belong to, the American Cassinese congregation, an abbot has a term of office until he's 75 years of age. It used to be 65 years of age. Sometimes people think it's for life, and that used to be the custom. It's still the custom in some congregations, but not ours. And other congregations, in fact, are much shorter periods. You get elected for 8 years, and then you can get reelected for a subsequent 8 years after that. But we had an election in 2012, right? Yes,
Yes.
2012, and 8 years ago. And Abbot Matthew had stepped down, and we had an election. So we summoned all the monks who were in solemn vows to attend. So there are some monks who were living in California. Others had assignments outside the monastery, and they all came. And we had, it's a 2-day process once they're here. And the first day is a scrutinium. And if you watch the, Father Mathias, did you mention scrutinium earlier in this
Yes.
conversation? Okay, so the scrutinium, we have a nomination round, and then the top vote getters in the nomination round are each asked to leave the room. And we had it in the old choir chapel. They're asked to leave the room individually. And then we have the scrutinium on that, and everyone gets to speak as to what are the qualities and perhaps the lack of qualities of that candidate to be the abbot. And we did in 2012, I don't think I'm revealing anything. We did that for 4 people. And then, so that was one day. And then the second day, the next morning, then we have the actual voting that takes place. And all the monks vote by secret ballot in seniority order. And then
Brother Isaac?
yes,
Those are paper ballots, correct? As
yes,
opposed
they're
to
paper ballots. Yeah.
as opposed
So
to
we
the marbles.
yes, as opposed to what?
Marbles.
Yes, not with marbles. No, unless we had marbles with names on them, but we don't do that. We have just 3 colors. I guess if we had 3 candidates, that would work. But so I was the secretary for the election. So putting my PhD in political science to good use. And we had pre-printed ballots with all the names of the monks in the house who were eligible. But other monks from other houses could be written in. There was a blank there. And so we do the balloting, which is 1 round, everyone votes once. And if someone gets a 2/3 vote on the first round, they're elected abbot then and there. And it's immediate because the retired abbot is no longer the abbot. So the seat is vacant, if you will. And then we have as many rounds as it needs. The first 3 rounds, you need a 2/3 vote. The next 3 rounds after that, it's a simple majority. And then if there's no one after 6 rounds, then there's a pause and we have to figure out what to do next. But luckily for us, I can't tell you which round it was, but we did have an election of Abbot Mark on that day. And the way we announced it to the community, and you can find this video on YouTube, Father Francis, it might even be on the monastery website, right?
Yes, if you search St. Anselm Abbey on YouTube, you can watch this.
So if you want to see what we looked like as a community in 2012, just after voting, it's a very happy, cheerful video. So I recommend you check it out. And we all process into the Abbey Church. We've rung the tower bells. So everyone here on campus knows that there's been an election, and there's enough time for people to get from wherever they are on campus to the Abbey Church before we process in. And the way people realize who the abbot is it's the last person in line now wearing a cross, pectoral cross, and that's the new abbot. And so it was very, I don't know how joyous and glorious and fun it was for you, Abbot Mark, but it was a great day for us. And there were hundreds of people who work on campus who came that day, and there was a lot of applause and cheers and cheering in the Abbey Church, honest to God cheering, not just applause. So it was a great day. So that was my take on it as the secretary, but maybe some of the others here on the panel want to speak to that day or two about how to elect an abbot.
Brother Isaac, I just was wondering, do you want to tell I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but the story of our first election for our first abbot that seems to me, and studying the history, is the reason why we now have this 3 ballots, 2/3, 3 more ballots, simple majority.
I don't know if St. Anselm was the cause of that, Father Francis, but the first, I think the first election took over 30 rounds of balloting to get to an election, and it was 2/3. You needed a 2/3, and one of the monks, I think it was the prior at the time, so the second in command, and he came within like a couple of votes of 2/3, but then was never able to get over that hump. And so in subsequent balloting, subsequent rounds, he kept falling further and further back. And then it took a while to get another candidate to actually to actually meet that threshold. And they said the rosary. At one point, they just stopped balloting the rounds, and they said the rosary. They weren't allowed to leave until it was done. And then they said their prayers, and then on the next ballot, Abbot Bertrand was elected the first abbot. Abbot Mark is the 5th abbot. Okay, so that's about elections in a monastery. Someone wants to know, do monks vote?
Do monks what?
Vote.
As in this election, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. I think the monks are pretty attuned to politics and national affairs. We have a recreation room where we have newspapers and topical magazines on higher ed and everything else. And I think there's a lot of discussion about what's going on at a national level and a state level. And I think election day is pretty, we're pretty well represented. You go to the polls, and most of the people have been doing it that are managing the situation at the polls have been doing it for years, and they come to recognize us over the years and greet us when we come in. And I think it's almost expected that the monks will show up in pretty good numbers.
If I might add to that, we're not allowed to wear the habit off campus unless it's a work of mercy. But for some reason, just about all the monks wear the habit to go vote. And it's not to send a message per se, but I think it's a wonderful witness to separation of church and state, but also the fact that the monks, even though they might seem like they've withdrawn from the world, are very much a part of the world and care. So we're not told how to vote, but we are encouraged to vote. There are cars marked just for that. So it's been interesting.
Yesterday when I went to vote, before going off to vote, I said, well, I'm not going to wear a mask with a St. Anselm logo, so I can go incognito. But then the monk I went with, who was Father Mathias, you may have seen the photo on social media, was going in his habit. So I was already in my habit. So I wore my habit. So I was recognized and got my photo taken. So that was that was the day yesterday. But anyways, it's not
members of this class of 24. So hopefully they're watching right now.
And they remember being photographed.
Yes.
With me. Yes. What are some types of generalizations or stereotypes that people make about being a monk?
Well, I was just going to say, and it ties into the last question, it seems like in many situations, people just kind of look to the monastery as a monolithic block, as in they all think the same way, or they're gonna be for this, or they're gonna be on this side of things, and that's not true at all. We have very different opinions, different backgrounds, different political affinities, and we come down on all kinds of questions very differently. So it's a place where you can see pretty lively debate and again, difference of thoughts on a whole host of things, whole range of things. But that is one myth that Everybody seems to think, well, they're monks, they must all think alike, vote alike, act alike.
And I think a lot of people think that monks are very, very serious. And that's one aspect of this house anyway, that we are when you need to be serious, but there's a lot of laughter in the monastery. We laugh at each other, we laugh at life, but it's a very joyful place. And I think most people are surprised by that. When we have guests in pre-COVID, they'll come for a meal and then they'll join us for common recreation. And I think they feel the same way I did the first time I saw the monks outside church. It's like, wow, they're just normal human beings. They socialize, they laugh. It's just, it was an eye opener. So I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. Everybody has this preconceived 12th century notion of what a monk is. We don't make copies all day. It's much more normal than most people would realize.
The misconception that I get all the time too is that we've taken a vow of silence, that we would just we walk around here with our eyes fixed on the ground and we don't talk to one another. Nothing could be farther from the truth. However, we do, I think, unlike a lot of the world out there today, recognize the value of silence. And that sort of goes along with what Father Mathias said about being serious, is that we're silent when we need to be, and we're silent when we should be. But again, we're a big family, basically, and with that comes laughter, joy, sorrow, anger, and everything in between. So, I
think that monks, that you've heard the motto, work and prayer, and our prayer, the community prayer, the liturgy, our style of liturgical worship here at St. Anselm's is different from some other monasteries in the United States. As a very formal style, it's a very simple style, but it's also a very formal style. And I think if you just went to Mass or evening prayer, say, and you saw the very formal style, you might make assumptions about the monks just from the formal style, and not realize, that the friendliness of the monks and the eagerness of the monks to interact with students and faculty and others at the college. So I think that is a little bit of a preconception, sometimes reinforced by attending liturgical events. So here's a question that kind of gets at maybe one assumption that people make about monks. After becoming a monk, how closely do you stay in contact with your family? Do you ever get to see them in person again?
For me, the family situation when I entered was kind of rough. My family was not that excited about me entering, even though my mother had two brothers who were here, and we had a long affiliation with the monks in the monastery. But my family was not that excited about it. But I do think that over the years, as they came over to different functions, they came to certainly my simple vows and solemn vows and ordination to the diaconate and priesthood. But they got to know some of the other families and some of the monks around my age, and they came to some of those celebrations as well. And they were drawn, I think, closer and closer to the life of this monastic community. And I think it's something they appreciated. I know it's something they appreciated. And those are my family members who are still alive, very much appreciate to this day. So that's just by way of saying that maybe your family expects that you're going to enter a monastery and they're not going to see you again, or much of you. They're going to miss the close contact, especially if you're, a few hours away. But it turns into a different kind of relationship, I think, for the family, and it's one that a lot of the families value very highly because of the spiritual nature of our life and the way we make the monastery itself makes a connection with people. It's a nice thing.
If any, it broadens the families, because amongst family, like Father Francis is, when you entered Brother Francis, I got to know your family really well. And I've since then, I did your grandfather's funeral, so I think that's a perfect example of how a confrere is welcomed into the community, and he brings his family with him, and not just metaphorically. It's the family unit expands. It's all the opposite. We give up the right to have children and spouses and all that, but the family is huge. And we see that especially when one of the confreres suffers the loss of a loved one. I lost my mother in September, and the outpouring of support that I got from my confreres was overwhelming, very consoling. And I've shared all that with my siblings, and they all agree that I am so blessed to be here. So it's, if anything, that the family relationship gets to a higher level. And I think we've all here, all the men in black have experienced that.
I saw my mother and sister today. My sister came on campus today. She took a tour with the admissions office. She's considering applying to be a student here next year. So yes, we do see our families. We are given time in the summer and at Christmas time to go and visit them and to be with them for some time. So we do see them. I always tell my parents, and I have told my parents for the last 5 years, I have a brother who's in the military and I have a sister who does public health work in Africa. And so I always tell my parents that the beauty of my vow of stability is they're always going to know where to find me. There will be no doubt in their minds that they know at least where one of their children are, depending on the day. But the other thing about the family dynamic is you do, as Abbot Mark said, you do give up maybe not a physical closeness or proximity by entering the monastery. My family lives 100 miles away from campus. And so I always believe, and I have believed for a long time, I love my family just as much as I ever have, if not more, but that love is different, right? So you can't always express that love to them by being there for everything, because we have obligations here that we need to take care of. And so I love my family just as much, if not more, as I did when I entered the monastery, but that love is expressed to them in different ways, as best that I can do.
Do any of you get bored with the monastic routine?
I would say that that I do not, for the most part. I mean, there are days when things crowd into your mind, and so you're maybe at Vespers or morning prayer, and you've got all these thoughts floating around in your head, and you're not paying much attention. So that's not good, but it happens. And but for me, I love the monastery. I love the community. I love our routines. I love our special days. I always try to say to our young people that our experiences as monks, that kind of the experiences that they compile differently than those of a lot of our friends who we left behind, and it's only over time that you see how that compiling of different experiences, different choices that you've made, the different routine that you live, compiles into something beautiful. Just as a married life maybe compiles in a very different way into something very beautiful. So it's this life has its own beauty. You would think, I think a lot of people would think that, wow, with the regular routine and everything, it might get pretty boring, but there's a lot here, and there's a lot to look to. And again, if the basis of the vocation is love of Christ, hopefully you're falling deeper and deeper in love with the passing of time.
Have you ever gotten into trouble in the monastery?
No.
Oh, good for you, Father Mathias. I knew you would say no.
Someone's lived a charmed life.
I'd say I've gotten myself into a lot of difficult situations in my work. Both my work as a finance person and my work as abbot. Everybody makes mistakes. So there can be days when you say, oh my God, how do I untangle this mess? And boy, if I'm not careful, it's going to get even worse. I think there's a lot of that. The more dramatic getting in trouble is probably less likely to happen here than elsewhere. But there's a lot of things that you can be responsible for that you can mess up that make for some pretty difficult times.
I remember reading the rule when I was a freshman in college and having this exact question, because if you read the rule, and I hope you all have, the phrase, he shall be subject to the discipline of the rule, comes up a lot. And it leads you to think, like, is it just this exercise in, you did this bad thing, go, this is your punishment. It really isn't. And in the way that I think we, in this community anyway, the way that we express regret or sorrow maybe for something that we've done that either affected an individual monk, confrere, or the entire community is really one of great humility, where we are a people who we have conversations with other, we apologize to one another, we take the good times and the bad times. Again, it's just like a big family, where everyone has a responsibility not only to their own behavior and to their own actions, but also to making sure that the community is on the right track and that the community is doing what it's supposed to be doing.
I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but for me to say, geez, have I really done something really, really stupid? And it's like, well, I've made mistakes. I never got a speeding ticket till I became a monk. But, I'm not going to beat myself to death over that. It's just, it just happened. So, you move on. And I think that's not because I'm a monk. That's just my disposition. You learn from that stuff and you move on. So I would have that same attitude, whether or not I was Mathias. But here, I think we're kept to a higher standard, obviously. But the rule is very forgiving. The single word that the gospel condenses down to is compassion. And we have to show that to ourselves as well as to others. So.
Thank you. So I'm going to do, we'll go and give everyone a crack at this one, since I want to end on a good note. So what's your favorite part of being a monk?
My favorite part is when there are moments when the community really pulls together as a unit, as a family, and those can be really special times. I love that. It's makes me feel like I made the right choice to give my life to a place like that. And that's not to downplay, obviously, the ultimate value of the life, which is, as I've said before a couple of times, your love for Christ. But the specialness of our being brothers comes, I think, more, at least for me, in those community moments where we pull together in a good way, because we have our foibles, every one of us, and we can annoy each other on a day-to-day basis for the same reasons, but day after day after day. But there are times when we really rise to the occasion, and it is a special time.
I agree with what Abbot Mark just said, but for me, the work that the house does is very important. And to be honest, I would not be here if St. Anselm Abbey was not part of St. Anselm College. I mean, if we made fruitcakes all day, or we didn't have the apostolate that we do, I wouldn't be here. So the college is what, and the students in particular, is really a way for me to practice my faith, to live it out, not just with my confreres, but with the student body, and not just the Catholic students either. It's everyone, faculty, staff, administration, students. It's just a great place.
I think for me, my favorite thing is very closely related to what Abbot Mark said, but it's that knowing that I myself have made a commitment to find God, to seek God, but knowing that I have a group of people here who exist, or they're here to help me with that goal, but that I am also here to help them because they have the same goal that I do. And so it's really the camaraderie and the fraternity that we have here. And as I've said several times already this evening, just the big family aspect to it. I'm come from a family. I'm the oldest of 6 children. And so stepping into a group like this was not a foreign concept to me. And I knew that any place or any endeavor that I would be part of for the rest of my life would have to involve that type of dynamic. And so that really is my favorite thing.
I think for me, there are various things obviously that attract one to monastic life and that make one happy, but sometimes all those elements get expressed in a particular moment or in a particular event. And I find, maybe echoing a little bit what Abbot Mark was saying, when the community comes together in liturgy for those especially important events, and sometimes they're funerals of a confrere, but also when someone is joining the community, someone's being ordained to the priesthood, someone's elected the abbot, or even the major feast days of the liturgical year for the Catholic Church, the Christmas and Easter, St. Benedict's Day. And it seems to me at those moments that it's very heartwarming and rewarding to know that your commitment to seeking God is shared for life with the people who surround you, and you're expressing that visibly together. So to me, those are the strong moments. Now, we've gone over by 3 minutes, so I'm sorry. So that was actually, in fact, the last question. I didn't necessarily announce it as the last answer to the last question, but that's what that was. And so I want to thank Abbot Mark, Father Mathias, and Father Francis for participating in the panel. And I want to thank all of you, the members of this year's cohort of Conversatio, for participating in this panel. And I know there are lots of unanswered questions, so all I can say is if you see us on campus, ask us or ask any of the monks, and they'll be happy to answer your questions. So with that, on behalf of the 4 of us, good evening, and thank you for participating.
Thanks.